Welcome to Student Stories, where we have conversations with students regarding school and other issues they're facing today. On this episode, I sat down with Newburyport High School senior Nora Morrissey to talk about online learning, college applications, and keeping our community safe.
I was wondering first, how your online experience has been. Are you remote?
I'm fully remote, yeah. The reason that I personally chose to go remote was just because of my concerns with the health of the community, as well as friends that I would be seeing outside of school, and people I'd see outside of school. And also just, it's a lot more freedom to be able to work on your own schedule. I just was getting a lot of anxiety at the thought of having to go back to school, especially in this current health climate. That's why I personally made the decision, but there are definitely struggles as well. It's very hard to be engaged in class at home. Obviously, I think a lot of people would agree that there's a million distractions. And also just being on the computer all the time, it can be really tiring and exhausting because there are little to no assignments that are available to be printed out and done. It's mainly all expected to be turned in online. So I know I've been struggling with that a little. A lot of other people have been struggling with that. So it's definitely rough. And I totally understand why a ton of people would want to be in school. For me personally, it just wouldn't be any better that way. And I also just think in that argument of people saying it'll affect mental health, it's definitely affected me and so many people I know, but I would just rather try to work on it myself and deal with it at home rather than go to school and risk my mental and physical health, as well as the physical health of a ton of other people, because my mental health affects me.
I feel like almost the mental health stuff, it's different than it was being in school. At least for me, when I was in high school, I feel like being in that environment sometimes was detrimental to my mental health. So I imagine there are different problems, not necessarily more or less, but do you see what I'm saying?
Definitely. I've over the course of the quarantine period where I really didn't see all that many people, I already have social anxiety, but that kind of amplified it. I know that was really good for me, knowing that I wouldn't have to go back into school and be seeing all these people all at once who I hadn't really talked to for a long time. So I'm sure a lot of other people who struggle with this kind of issues were a little bit relieved, just because of the social anxiety aspect of it. And but that also kind of parallels, it's very lonely doing online work. I think if they gave us space to interact with people we know, that would definitely be more effective, and feel a lot less lonely. You're definitely missing that social aspect. I usually don't see anyone outside of my house most weekdays, just because there's so much work. And the state of health we're in, obviously. But yeah, it's definitely, our lives have been kind of absorbed by the whole online schooling thing.
That's something I'm definitely finding, that it's well, of course, right now, especially right now, there's a lot of cases in Newburyport. And so, of course, we're trying to be safe, but there's even to hang out in a safe way, there's not even really that much time to do that because of how much pressure there is with school. I was going to ask, how are you finding ways to try to maintain connections?
If I'm in a class with a bunch of my friends, I'll kind of text them during it, whether it's just questions about what's happening or just random things about what's happening in the class. Aside from that, it is really hard to kind of connect with people, especially if you're in classes where you don't know that many people. Even if I'm not in classes with people, people will send texts about their specific classes in bigger group chats, so other people can respond to them and stuff. And we kind of just all inform each other what's happening in our separate classes. Not all the information, obviously, but struggles we're having or something funny that happened and stuff like that. So that's definitely fun too, because a lot of us take the similar classes or have similar teachers. So even if we're not in the same class, we have a lot of the same struggles and same assignments and have experienced similar things.
This is such an unprecedented time. It's like we're kind of separate but together in a way where everyone's going through this at the same time. And I feel like it's so important to kind of focus on those relationships and connections and find some kind of community, even though we're so separated from each other. That's awesome. Trying to apply to college throughout all this must be extremely challenging. So I'm wondering, like, how is your college application process going?
I'm actually doing well because I have a college counselor. And I've been working with her since like the beginning of junior year. So that's definitely been really helpful. I literally can't imagine how other people are budgeting their time because I have like deadlines and stuff. And she's kind of been like guiding me and letting me know where I should be at each point, what things I should have done, which is something that I definitely need and is especially helpful at this point. I literally commend like all of my friends and everyone else who's like doing this on their own or has had to like budget all of their time, because I don't think that I could have done that by myself. It's just such an overwhelming process, and even knowing where to start is kind of impressive. So yeah, it's really exciting, like submitting applications myself and like all my other friends submitting stuff, and we'll like edit each other's like college essays. So that's fun because I do like looking at like what they've written and their work and stuff. And like from having a college counselor, like she's giving me like some insight. So I'll be like, oh guys, like I know the scoop on this, like here's what you're supposed to do. So that feels good that I like can help them in some little way. But yeah, it's definitely been harder for other people than me, but I'm very excited for that process to be over because it still is time consuming.
It definitely, I think without a counselor, and I mean with a counselor too, it takes so much motivation because it's something that like in the back of your head you kind of have to get done, but it's also like not it can't be the priority because you have so many other things going on. But it's tough to like plan for a future also when you don't really know what that's going to look like, especially right now. Tell me a little bit about your work with reopening plans over the summer, but also how has that kind of moved forward? And are you still, despite being home, despite doing school remotely, are you still involved with the reopening decisions? Because I know they just put out something like 50% capacity.
We did like Instagram polls and stuff and like reached out to people, gathered a bunch of signatures of mainly students. And then I drafted this demands letter, which is basically kind of detailed the situation that happened, why we were concerned, and then kind of made like a list of demands for the school board. And it was kind of like, if you are expecting all students to return back or like come back from remote to hybrid in some form, then like these need to be followed. And most of our things were like pulled from other demands by like teachers unions. It was a lot about health and safety of teachers and students. We couldn't speak for teachers because obviously we can't do that, and a lot of the teachers couldn't actually speak to us and let us like voice their concerns. Making it remote would make like a lot of teachers be able to be paid obviously and teach from home, especially since a lot of them I know have at-risk family members, and that's why they're staying home because they don't really have a choice. So just the fact that they had to choose their health over their like livelihood basically was just so unfair, and they were so abrupt with the decision that it didn't allow a lot of time for teachers to prepare. And it was just honestly unfair because the whole summer teachers and like administrators had been meeting and like analyzing everything in the school and like the proper procedures, and decided like we do not have the facilities to make this happen. That is why we are deciding to go remote at the moment. And it was like a months long process. They like trained teachers. And so teachers were like, okay, this is what's happening. That's great. And they had their plans. And then the school committee was just like, no, we're not going to do that. So it's just wildly unfair to the teachers, which is one of the reasons we were very mad. But again, it totally threatens the entire community as well. And it's just inconsiderate, honestly. It's very clear the school committee put like the popularity aspect over actual concerns for our community's health. And we've seen that because a lot of people who have been in school, like a majority, not only in the high school, but lower grade levels, a lot of people have gotten infected or sick. And it's honestly ridiculous because, like, as you said, cases are rising in Newburyport, and their response was like, let's bump capacity up to like 50%. I don't know, maybe there's more to that I haven't seen, but just from a even unbiased perspective, that doesn't make any rational sense to me. And it's really frustrating because I genuinely don't understand how like full-grown adults who have witnessed the full like scope and impact of this pandemic are deciding to risk the health of their students and teachers and everybody when they know that cases are rising again and it's going to have a negative effect. That's something that you can't even question. It's obviously going to have a negative effect because it already has. So yeah, we wrote that demand letter, published it in the Daily News. I definitely got like a lot of feedback from my teachers and stuff being like, thank you for writing that. Like, you definitely like put our concerns there, and it's like good to know that students actually care about this issue, not only for themselves, but for teachers, and recognize how hard it is, which is obviously something that you also have to take into account with like teaching. Like, remote teaching is just as hard as remote learning. So yeah, as of right now, I'm kind of just personally trying to protect myself. I'm definitely concerned, and it's hard to kind of think of and how to approach this and like what the next steps are. I've been more focused with school in the past few weeks, kind of just being like, there are more cases. It's only like a matter of time before they send us like all into remote, and then they made the decision to go 50% capacity, and I don't understand the reasoning or the logic at all. I'm concerned for the community and for my family, and it's gonna lead to another lockdown, which was incredibly depressing and difficult for everybody in March, April, May. So I would hate for something like that to happen again, but people just seem like so oblivious to it because they think the virus has died down just because it's getting less media attention. Like, I know we've been trying to schedule like senior events still, like, quote, socially distanced. But it's really like, I say this all the time, especially with students and kids, it's impossible to host something that's completely safe, especially like large scale, because like kids are kids and people are people. We're automatically like drawn to other people, and even if you try to enforce these rules and like reprimand anybody or restrict people from doing things, people are gonna find ways to interact with each other, and that's not the worst thing. But when it's a large amount of people, it's obviously a safety risk. And I totally appreciate how the school is trying to like make it fun for seniors still, but I just think if we kind of did our best to be vigilant about health and safety now, we could have a lot of those events safely like later in the year, which would be much more preferable than to having like some fun events at the beginning of the year and then being like completely shut down for the important stuff like graduation and prom and all that.
I know it's hard to like continue work right now, especially like with school and other things going on, but even just like I appreciate you coming on tonight because I feel like people seeing this, it can also help them understand a student perspective and have some empathy, I guess, for like the reality of the situation and try to understand why it's important to put the community first.